Hi, heroes. This is Stan Lee coming at you. Want you to know, Marvel has always been and always will be a reflection of the world right outside our window. That world may change and evolve, but the one thing that will never change is the way we tell our stories of heroism. Those stories have room for everyone, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or color of their skin. The only things we don't have room for are hatred, intolerance, and bigotry. That man next to you, he's your brother. That woman over there, she's your sister. And that kid walking by, hey, who knows? He may have the proportionate strength of a spider. We're all part of one big family, the human family, and we all come together in the body of Marvel. And you're part of that family. You're part of the Marvel universe that moves ever upward and onward to greater glory. In other words, Excelsior!
Hello and welcome to Geekcast Radio. This is episode 190. I'm, of course, TFG1Mike, and ladies and gentlemen, it is a sad day for almost everyone in this entire world, because Stan Lee, comics legend, some might say the godfather of all comics, at least Marvel anyway, has passed away. I'm joined by TV's Mr. Neil. Hello, sir.
Excelsior.
And JT from Saskatoon. Hello.
Excelsior, Ghost Nappa.
Okay, then. This news just came out as we're recording this. It came out about, 5 or 6 hours before we recorded this. And, wow. I woke up from a nap to this news, folks. This is really, really sad.
I woke up this morning to this. You know, you wake up, you roll over, you grab the phone account, I'm just going to, scroll through Facebook as the engine warms up, and then, well, I don't want to get out of bed at all today.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't want to make any comparisons between Kirby and Ditko and Lee at all. We're not even going to do that. We're not going to do whose legacy was better or who had the more legacy kind of card at all. That's just
It was
silly.
all of them.
It's all of them. That's
They're
the
all
thing.
the greats.
Exactly.
If there was a Mount Rushmore of comic books, three of them would, I maybe not three, I would argue at least two of them would be Lee and Kirby.
Yeah.
I'd put Ditko up there.
I'd put Ditko up there too. He did do a lot as well.
And Dan DeCarlo.
Thank God you didn't say Dan DiDio.
No, God, no.
I would have crawled through the internet and slapped you.
No. Dan DeCarlo's the Archie Comics guy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's such a sad. I mean, and again, like I mentioned off air, we're coming up on the anniversary of my own father passing some years ago, and then, like I was telling you guys and telling the listeners here, I'd seen one of the many, many tributes on social media today. A friend of mine, it was just this look of Stanley, with that shit-eating grin, doing the thwip with his hands, and it said Stanley. Was it 1922, 2018? And the other half of the picture is a screen cap from Black Panther where T'Challa's in the dream. Was it the ancestral plane? Talking to his dad, I was not ready to be without you. And I was just like, oh God. And that's when the waterworks started for me. Because, I've said it many times before and not always with certainty. There are very few sacred cows in my life. Mm. And Stan Lee was one of them. And I've heard a lot of friends, fellow podcasters, fellow comic book fans talk.
That shall not be named here.
Carver, who have talked a lot of shit about Stan Lee, and I don't think it comes from any negative space that what they've said. It's just you got to take stuff with a grain of salt. The man was not a saint. He was saintly, but he was not a saint.
Yeah. Neil, do you remember the first Stan Lee created comic character that you read, or do you remember the first Stan book you read? Because I honestly don't think I've ever read any of Stan's actual stuff. I've seen, obviously, his media, not just the movies, but obviously for me, where it started was the 94 Spider-Man cartoon. As much as everyone hates the bleeding of red in that series.
Oh, there's more wrong with that than just that. You know that.
Stop it.
The very first comic book character I ever latched onto was Spider-Man. I had a Spider-Man big wheel when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
I mean, yeah.
Nice.
So I always loved Spider-Man. He was just this cool character. He was more down to earth, certainly a lot more down to earth than like Superman. And and his power is that he's like a spider. I mean, how cool is that? Like a 3-year-old is going to latch onto something like that. So I loved him. So it was much later and down the line that I learned more about the creator and like all the stuff that he had done, like creating the Fantastic Four and other things. He had Stan had his hands in a lot of stuff. I just went to look up like all that he had created, and it was just like this monster list. I'm like, oh god, I can't even run through this.
No.
So, but I think he's most associated with like Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. I think those are the big two.
As well as the X-Men, I would say.
Yeah.
I remember him doing a lot of stuff talking about, the X-Men and things like that.
Like the first couple of dozen titles that Marvel brought out in the 60s,
Yeah, the funny thing is as quote-unquote bad as Neil says Spider-Man the Animated Series is, I don't care. I still loved it back then, and I still love it now, because that was my definition of Spider-Man at the time. I had not read any comics before that. The Spider-Man Animated Series is what got me to go into Walden Books in 95 and pick up a couple of, I think it was a couple issues of Amazing where they were doing something with Tooms and Vulture and Scorpion and a bunch of the other people. It wasn't the Sinister Six stuff, but it was a bunch of other things. And, that's my defining for Spider-Man. And I've liked other things that, Spider-Man has done and X-Men as well. I like Fantastic Four, but I've never really gotten into them all that much.
Well, they're more of a dynasty. They go back way farther than even Spider-Man, and it's like by the time we came along, they were kind of passé, but still kind of cool.
Yeah, because I mean, the Fantastic Four literally started not only the Marvel Silver Age of comics, but like the Silver Age. Like the Fantastic Four #1 came out in like 1961. Another, like, I think 4 or 5 years before Spider-Man 1 came out, like Amazing Fantasy 50 and then Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, for me, growing up, like Neil said, my first taste of Stan Lee's, like, anything was the 67 Spider-Man cartoon, which is top 5 all-time best theme songs ever. And the old Marvel Superheroes Incredible Hulk story where you'd have to have one complete story was in 3 different parts. As far as his writing, I think the first time I ever read anything was this little mini comic of Amazing Spider-Man #1 that I got with I forget if I got it as a stocking stuffer or with an action figure or something, but it was 4 inches by 3, and it was just this micro mini version of Amazing Spider-Man 1 where he breaks into the Baxter building. It's like, hey, you guys got money, right? I'd like a job. And Reed tells him to take off, and it's just like that. Even though there's these fantastic characters, he made them seem so ordinary. Like Peter Parker's this ordinary guy. Yeah, he's a little bit smarter and everything, but he has to pay bills. He's got to look after Aunt May. He's got to get through school. The stuff I really loved reading growing up were Spider-Man classics that came out in the early to mid 90s were just basically reprints of the original, Lee and Ditko run of Amazing Spider-Man. And it's just like, this guy gets me, as a kid, this guy gets what I like about comics. It spoke, all that classic Marvel Silver Age stuff, that always spoke to me.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just one of those things, and like you were saying, JT, about certain people, whoever they are, posting on Facebook, whether it's memes or whether it's images or whatever. I saw a meme image that basically said something to the effect of, everyone's going to cry when the next Marvel movie comes out and there is no Stan Lee cameo, and all as it says is "in loving memory."
He'll be in the next Avengers movie. They're done shooting that. I'm sure they got him.
I'm sure. You're most likely right. I'm just saying, whatever the next one is that he isn't in,
yeah,
people, you're going to have a lot of watery theaters, is what I'm saying.
A lot of tear-stained cheeks.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely know he's got a cameo in Captain Marvel, and then Avengers Annihilation, which I think is pretty much what they're going to call that at this point. It hasn't been confirmed.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, Stan Lee's not just known for writing Marvel comics. It's a lot of these articles have said he's an ambassador for the medium.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, he was. Like, I mean, whether it's his cameo in Mallrats, whether it's all the philanthropy work he did, he's essentially the real life Iron Man of the comics. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's the way it was. That's the way it always will be.
Speaking of Mallrats, I just realized something. That the beginning of the next Hollywood Babylon, you can expect like a 45-minute soliloquy from Kevin Smith. He's just going to be like, "This man, I loved him," and he's just going to go on and on and on.
I saw one of the...
Ralph Garman may as well just not show up.
Yeah, I mean, Ralph might as well just take the Batmobile back to the Batcave. But I
want to hear his imitation of Stan Lee.
Oh, no.
Or have Ralph Garman, have Stan Lee and Adam West have a conversation.
Oh, please, stop.
As Stan gets to the pearly gates and there's Batman ready to welcome him into the afterlife, come on.
I mean, you hear the way Ralph went on about Adam West dying. That's how Kevin is going to be this Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a one of these Google news articles from whatever website it was. I forget which website it was, where they're showing the tweet. Thousands of people tweet about the passing of Stan Lee or whatever. One of the posts was from Instagram or wherever, where it's Kevin's photo of Stan on the throne with Kevin on the left and Jay on the right. And it's this, entire book that Kevin wrote for an Instagram post. So I have no doubt that that episode of Hollywood Babylon is going to be extremely, not only long, but like you said, 45 minutes, just Kevin talking about Stan and the impact that he made on him, and why shouldn't he? I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Smith anymore, at least for a lot of the stuff he's been doing lately, but still, Clerks, Mallrats, yada yada yada, all the early stuff he's done, I still love that stuff. What's really sad is that but Stan lost his wife a year ago. They died a year apart. I don't know. I don't think it was around the same time, or it wasn't to the day or anything like that. I'd have to look up Joan's death, but they were married for 69 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
If there's one thing Stan loved more than, talking to fans, it was his wife.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, like you said before, Mike, you hear her voice in the last episode of the 90s Fox Spider-Man cartoon, and it's just you could hear just in his voice, he's, and I've said this in a couple of posts on Facebook, he's the rascally great uncle we all wanted in our family. Mm-hmm. This guy who was sure, he was getting on in years, but he is still, he's a kid on the inside.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, the man would almost do anything for anyone. I mean, say what you will about the we're not going to bring up the whole handler situation or whatever that story was earlier this year about his people supposedly misappropriating stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But, whatever, his fees were or whatever it was, as long as you were at a convention and you could afford to, whether it's taking a picture with the guy, getting something autographed, you did. Because it's very rare any of us would meet a legend. And I know several people who have met him. My buddy Doug Abel from Talking About My Generation has, and a couple other people I know have, and whatever. And just, look at the writers now, again, say what you will about comic book writers of today, but you look at Dan Slott and you look at Christos Gage and you look at anybody else between the time Stan stopped writing Spider-Man and now, his stuff all affected them. Yes, they're going to do their own thing and whatever else, but without Stan Lee, we wouldn't have had 10 years of Dan Slott on Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And those cool stories that he wrote for that book.
And here's the thing, like, a lot of people, not just a certain co-host from a Comic-Con cast that I'm on, has... Jesus. I'm just saying, like, I've talked...
Get the knife!
Yeah. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. So, I've tried to get him to, like, talk about, comment on stuff like fan fiction. He's like, well, I don't read fan fiction because it's just bad writing. I was like, dude... If not for the work of Stan Lee and, guys like Denny O'Neil and Bill Finger and all these other greats that we've loved and lost over the years, at this point, all you're writing in comic books is fan fiction to some degree or another. And a lot of these fan fiction writers, a lot of writers, creators in any number of mediums are there because they were inspired in some small part by Stan the Man Lee. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a guy who started in, like, the early days of the comics medium in World War II, in Timely Comics, before it morphed into Atlas and then into Marvel over the years. I mean, comic books as a medium were circling the drain when he started writing stuff in the 60s again, like after World War II, when Tales was a Tales of Suspense, when it was, like, him and Kirby doing all, like, Xenu, the Space Hulk, or the original Fin Fang Foom storyline, stuff like that. If he didn't create that bridge, we wouldn't have anything that we've had now. And because, like I said before, he's an ambassador. Now, you guys may or may not know this. Some of the listeners may or might know this. Stan Lee is at least partially responsible for Power Rangers. And I'll explain why. Are you aware of the Tokusatsu Spider-Man series,
yes.
Spider-Man from the 1970s? Well, Toei and Marvel, because Stan was, trying to branch Marvel properties out beyond comic books. We had the Incredible Hulk show and those critical darling Doctor Strange and Captain America TV movies from the 70s. I mean, how dare the Marvel movies succeed now, because they're just writing on the backs. Okay, I can't. Those movies sucked. But Stan Lee, they sold the rights of Spider-Man to Toei, who's responsible for stuff like Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, which we knew over here as Kamen Rider and Power Rangers.
Also Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and Transformers.
Yeah. What Neil said, folks. I won't call and there's only been one adaptation of Kamen Rider in America. It was Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, and if anyone tells you that there was any show from that in the mid-90s involving an ugly furry monkey duck baby, I'll call you a liar. Anyway, so Stan Lee, you got Japanese Spider-Man, and they were going to bring over the series, I believe it was Battle Fever J, which was one of the original Super Sentai. See, before this they had Super Sentai, but it was just this multicolored team of heroes. They didn't have giant robots from the beginning. The first Tokusatsu series with a transforming giant robot was the Japanese Spider-Man show, Spider-Man, with Leopardon. That, he would fly up to this thing in a flying, like, Formula One race car, because it's Japan, and go with it. And later on, there was, I think it was Sun Vulcan, which is a number of years after this that Stan Lee was also a part of, because they were actively trying to bring that over, at least in a dubbed form, not in the manner that Power Rangers is adapted now. So if there's one thing I am eternally grateful for Stan Lee for, it's, he looked out what was out there and tried to bring this stuff over to America. I mean, the efforts of Spider-Man and Battle Fever J, that gave us like that awesomely cheesy Godzilla King of Monsters comic that Marvel published in the 70s, where Dum Dum Dugan and a S.H.I.E.L.D. team tried to capture the King of all monsters. It gave us Red Ronin, which is this giant red, silver, and gold mecha that's been in any number of stories in the Marvel Universe over the years. And all this stuff is because Stan Lee went out there and tried to bring Marvel to the world and bring a little bit of the world back.
Exactly. He's had several projects over the years that I've kind of scratched my head at. Neil knows one of them. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
And it's just, there are certain things you would expect, and there are certain unexpected things that Stan has done over the years. Like, when Spider-Man hit, 16 years ago now? That was like, okay, sure, it's the first Spider-Man film, whatever. You'd think that the creator, co-creator, whatever you want to call Stan, would be in it somewhere, but you don't expect where it's going to be. And that was one of the greatest things about the Marvel movies, is finding out where and how non-attention based it is, where his cameos show up, like the mailman at the Baxter Building, or one
Willie
of the
Lumpkin.
generals. Yep, one of the generals, or Hugh Hefner, or whatever it is. And then there's things like Stripperella, and you wouldn't have expect to have Stan's name on that.
That's a great cartoon. And he did a cameo in that.
Yes, he did.
A recurring cameo. He was like one of the Q-like gadget guys that gave Stripperella all her gear. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite cameos that he's done in a Marvel movie was the strip club DJ in Deadpool.
Yeah.
And that's not one of those, he needed a check. That's just him having fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my favorite, aside from Willie Lumpkin, which is this, a character that was in Fantastic Four and over the years, like that's Stan right there. Like they even drew him in the comics to kind of look like Stan with his nose and glasses and ears. But I think my favorite Stan cameo in a Marvel movie was from Age of Ultron, like where Thor's giving everyone like two drops of Asgardian mead out of his little eyedropper bottle. He's like, "Come on, Blondie, give me a hit." And then there's the two guys carting away, "Excelsior." And he's just like bombed out of his head.
Yeah.
I don't know, what was your guys' favorite Stan cameo in the movies?
Neil?
I don't know. I guess I gotta, because I don't have a vivid memory of any of them. It's been a while since I've seen any of the Marvel movies. I'm gonna just have to default to the Stripperella one, where he had the cordless phone that he just invented.
Oh no.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'd have to say I have two. One is in Daredevil, when Matt Murdock basically saves his life. And the other is, I'm looking for Tony Stank. I love that.
This is Tony Stank right here.
Right here.
Let that go, by the way.
Yep. Nope.
And just the smile on Don Cheadle's face. No, either that's because he's got that line, or, he's having a cameo with Stan Lee. I'm going to say 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I also like the subtle Stan cameos in the Netflix series.
Yeah.
Where it's not him on camera, but he's like doing the, Sergeant Stan Lee of the NYPD and all those posters, doing the Uncle Sam, I want you pose on a lot of stuff.
Yep. What they did with him, or for him, or whatever, in the PS4 Spider-Man game, I was not expecting that, and I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, where it's at. I don't think they actually.
He's at the diner.
Mix? Yeah, but do they call him Stan, or did he have another?
No, I don't think they actually. But it's him. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And here's a treat, you guys may not have noticed this. Did you know he's technically got a double cameo in the 2008 Incredible Hulk movie?
He drinks the juice and then he does something else.
Well, no, he drinks like the Hulk tainted.
That's the second one, though. That's the one that's the official canon.
Yeah. And
You're talking about the Ang Lee one, right?
No, he's talking about
the Ed Norton one.
Okay.
Yeah. The Ang Lee one, he cameos on screen with the Incredible Hulk, the immortal Lou Ferrigno, who, dear God, that man's still a beast. But no, in 2008, he plays the guy who drinks like the tainted soda, and then the name of the pizza place that Banner crashes at while he's stalking Betty in the film is Stan Lee's.
Very cool. Very cool, very cool. He's somebody that, I believe we joked, not we as in the three of us, but myself and a few other people joked about this about 4 or 5 years ago. When Stan goes, the whole world is going to come crashing down, at least the whole entertainment world. And no, it's probably not, but he was a guy that not only did he do so much for the fans himself in just real life as himself, but as a writer, as someone who created these, without him, comic book movies wouldn't be where they are. At least the Marvel stuff wouldn't. I don't know what the hell the dildo and DC are going to do, but, it's one of those things where without Stan Lee, you don't have the last 80 plus years of comics.
Well, yeah, I mean, a huge chunk of it. And it's not different. And not just American comics. There's a couple of manga that's Karakuri Doji Ultimo is this. I don't think he did a lot of writing on it. I think he kind of came up with a lot of the concepts, and he edited stuff here and there in that manga, but he didn't write it on the whole. There's the Hero Man. I've seen the anime of this manga. And he wrote a lot on that series about this kid that gets like this busted toy that turns into this giant. It's kind of like a Baymax-esque sort of protector, more Gigantor than Baymax, that sort of thing. I mean, outside of Marvel. And there's also I have this entire series in single issue form and in the trades, the Just Imagine Stan Lee creating series from DC Comics in the early aughts. Have you ever read that? It's basically he came up with concepts like Batman is Wayne Williams. He's this black kid who was framed for a crime he didn't commit. Goes to prison, gets out, and the guy that actually killed his mom is looking for him. So he becomes like this masked wrestler, Batman, with like this giant bat mask and fake wings, and eventually becomes a vigilante. The Green Lantern is this guy his power is like the power of Yggdrasil, like the power of the earth. So it's this weird kind of Captain Planet knockoff. And I mean, if you can find it to read, I highly recommend it. It's just all one shots with Stan Lee. It's the idea of what they did with the Green Lantern and Flash in the 60s when they came back in the Showcase Presents comic. He took the name and just ran with it. And I mean, if you want to see some good, if you just want some joy in your life reading a comic book, read this stuff, folks. It's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
I still haven't forgiven Stan Lee for Ravage 2099 because that was just bad. I got to be honest.
I think at this point you can. Come on now.
It's not, again, unlike other people, I'm not going to hold a grudge into perpetuity. Yes, I'm going to keep beating that dead horse.
Yes. Well, maybe we should dig a grave for that dead horse. Anyway, any final thoughts, Neil, on Stan before we get the heck out of here?
Well, there's one moment that I had kind of in the back of my head. It's not really a Stan Lee moment. It's more of a Spider-Man moment. It's the most random sort of cameo that ever, well, not that ever happened, but it's one of my favorites, is an episode of G.I. Joe where, I forget what the setup was, but they ran into Zartan, and they're like, Zartan! And he's like, Were you expecting Spider-Man? That was just that sort of like little internal reference there, because it was a Marvel production at the time. So I always thought that was kind of funny and cool. Yeah. And I think Spider-Man would show up a few times. That somebody would be watching Spider-Man on TV or something.
Yeah. One last thing, like we mentioned this off air, and there is a certain amount of hucksterism to Stan Lee. You know, he didn't always share the. It's not like Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Like, he didn't outright steal credit with a lot of things, but I also like how his friends weren't afraid to take shots at him. Like when Jack Kirby left for DC Comics in like the early 70s and created, you know, the Fourth World, like Mr. Miracle and the New Gods and all that, he had this character show up in the Mr. Miracle comic called Funky Flashman, who is this very boisterous, ostentatious, is like, I'm going to make you a star, baby. And if you could read that and not come away, Neil knows what I'm talking about. If you could read that comic and you had come away not even thinking that wasn't supposed to be Stan Lee, like, come on, that was Stan Lee. Like, my favorite image of Stan Lee is one of the first images I ever, like, physical pictures I ever saw of him was, it was just this headshot of him from, like, the late 80s, early 90s. You know, the hair is starting to thin back a bit. He's got those really dark aviators on, but it's just that smile on his face. Like, this man is loving life. And that's how I'm always going to remember him. Good and bad. It's smiling Stan Lee. Like, how can you hate this guy?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it was on Netflix. They had his biopic or documentary on his life at the time, and this is where I had seen him and Joan and everything else and all that. And if it's still on Netflix, folks, go check it out. I think it's With Great Power Comes Great Responsibility, obviously. That's what it would be called. But it's basically the life and times of Stan Lee. It came out a couple of years ago. Go check that out. I wish I could have met the man, but, you know, it is what it is. His influence will go on forever. I mean, there's nothing that he didn't do that people will not look at and say, wow. I mean, he was everywhere. And he will be missed. So I think that's going to do it for us here on Geekcast Radio. JT, where can the people find you online?
Well, they can find me every so often on the Comic Connoisseurs podcast with Ben, the host Carver, and Red Ink. And you can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at JT from Saskatoon.
Neil, how about you?
DeCN.com, my own superhero comic series about DeCN. You can go over there and read all about her and her DeCN and her amazing friends.
I am at TFG1Mike on Twitter. Go to geekcastradio.com. Check out all the other episodes we do as well. I think, like I said before, I'm going to close this out with the end of the 94 Spider-Man the Animated Series with Stan and Joan Lee. Catch you next time, folks.
Who is that exotic lady?
Oh, her? Now, she's my ride. It's been great meeting you. Take care of yourself.
You too, Spider-Man. Farewell and good luck. Well, I wonder how I'm supposed to get down from here. I suppose I could wait for the Fantastic Four to drop by and give me a lift.
That's Stan Lee. He's quite a guy.
I think he's truly special.
Well, Madam Webb, where to now?
Face front, true believer.